Hello and welcome to True North EV. I'm your host James, and today we're going to be talking about coast-to-coast EV road trips. Now that's something I haven't done coast-to-coast, but I've done quite a few road trips in an electric vehicle. And let's get into this. From the coastal highways of British Columbia to the windswept shores of Newfoundland, we're going to explore how EVs are conquering the second largest country in the world. And yes, it's absolutely doable. Not always easy, but doable. Canada presents unique challenges for EV drivers, our enormous distance, remote areas, and extreme weather conditions from coast to coast to coast. But as our charging infrastructure grows and EVs become more capable, those cross-country dreams are becoming everyday realities. Whether you're planning your first multi-province journey, which is awesome, annoying sometimes, but awesome, or you're looking to optimize your road tripping strategy, today's episode will equip you with everything you need to know about route planning, charging strategies, seasonal considerations, and the real life experiences of us who have done it. So we're hoping that you get a lot out of it, especially with summertime coming up, and it's going to be awesome to do some road trips. Let's start with the big picture. What does the EV road trip landscape actually look like across Canada in 2025? The backbone of cross-country travel is obviously the Trans-Canada Highway, which is nicely covered, and there's been tremendous progress in creating what many call the electric highway along the route. The Petro-Canada Electric Highway Initiative launched several years ago. It was groundbreaking. We also had another company that did it, and it was Sun Country Highways. Sun Country Highway did it before them, but that was just level 2 chargers. So Petro-Canada first came in with level 3 chargers, establishing fast charging stations roughly every 250 kilometers from Victoria to Halifax. It's kind of changed now, but the Canadian charging network is much more than just one company's stations. Let's break down this by region. British Columbia. We're going to start from the west and work our way to the east. British Columbia has one of Canada's country's most developed charging networks with excellent coverage along major routes like Highway 1, the Sea to Sky Highway in BC. BC Hydro has been aggressive in deploying chargers, even in more remote areas like the northern reaches of the province. Vancouver Island is also extremely well served, making the island a surprisingly accessible EV destination. Tons of people I'm hearing chatting about how easy it is to get around British Columbia in an electric vehicle. The prairies, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, they have been significantly improved in the last few years, but still present challenges. The Yellowhead Highway, Trans-Canada, are reasonably well covered. You can pretty much get anywhere as long as you stick to those. But venturing north requires careful planning and many adapters. Alberta's Peak to Prairies network has been added important connectivity to the southern part of the province. Saskatchewan remains one of the most challenging prairies, but really close to Manitoba for challenging prairie province for EV travel with greater distances between chargers. Although Manitoba may be right there with trying to get, especially up to our more northern communities. Ontario, it's our most populous province, offers excellent coverage in the Golden Horseshoe and along the Quebec and Windsor corridor. Northern Ontario has historically been the most significant gap in cross-country EV travel. And they call Northern Ontario basically like Thunder Bay and west. So the Northern Ontario has historically been the most significant gap in cross-country EV travel, but recent installations have improved the situation along Trans-Canada routes. The stretch between Thunder Bay and Sault Ste. Marie, once known as the EV dead zone, now has fast chargers at key locations. With this, we actually had a friend already do that trip just recently. He picked up a Chevy Bolt, I believe from Montreal. and it was driving it back to Winnipeg. And yeah, there was he actually did it during a blizzard. And there was a little gap there that he was really concerned that he'd have to go down to the States to do, because there's a lot more chargers in the States, and that's kind of where most of these apps kind of direct you. But staying in Canada now, it's getting way easier. There's way more chargers. It's actually becoming quite easy almost in certain locations, not in all. Quebec deserves special mention for its pioneering I'm going to butcher this, Circuit Electric Network, one of North America's first public charging networks, and still one of the most comprehensive. Coverage extends well beyond major cities into the eastern townships, Gas Peninsula, and even up to more remote northern region. This is what I would love for Manitoba to become, is to get that nice coverage all around. The Maritimes have come a long way in recent years with New Brunswick's e-charge network. It connects the province well, and Nova Scotia has developed good coverage along main routes. Prince Edward Island, being compact, is quite EV friendly. They don't need very many fast chargers. And Newfoundland has made remarkable progress with the Trans-Canada now having sufficient coverage to make the journey from Port aux Basques to St. John. Now, the territories, they remain our final frontier in a way for EV travel. While there are now chargers connecting Whitehorse to southern BC, true long-distance travel remains challenging and requires careful planning or alternate transportation solutions. Although it kind of already is. The cities, towns, they're all separated by such vast amounts that even in a gas vehicle, I would think it'd be a struggle up there. Now, what about seasonal considerations? This is where Canadian EV road tripping differs dramatically from what you might read in American or European guides. They have it kind of nice in the States and in Europe. In winter conditions, EVs typically lose 20 to 40% of their range depending on the temperature, vehicle model, or whether you're using cabin heat. The newest EVs with heat pumps perform much better, but you'll still need to adjust expectations. My rule of thumb is to plan for 50% less range during our Canadian winters, so you're never surprised. If you plan for 50%, you won't have to worry about it. And be prepared for slower charging rates in extreme cold. Summer brings its own considerations. Air conditioning doesn't really impact range as dramatically as heating, but on long highway stretches at higher speeds, you'll still see decreased efficiency compared to city driving. Now, let's talk about what makes Canadian EV road trips unique compared to other countries. So we are separated from city to city by hundreds of kilometers. It's not a few kilometers. Our major cities are more than probably 150 kilometers apart from each other. And in between, you kind of have smaller towns, not massive, what some countries and call towns are still 100, 200,000 people, where ours are just a few thousand sometimes. So usually they're not going to have a level 3 charger there. Our winter driving considerations and emergency preparedness. You can basically be driving in Alberta in plus 10 weather and then drive through the prairies and hit a blizzard that's stopping you dead. Trans-Canada Highway is shut down. And especially if you're driving east, you're going to have the bilingual nature of charging infrastructure. So you might be struggling if you're not as familiar with French. And of course, you got where, like I had said earlier, where some of these apps, when you try to do route planning, they like to send you down through the states, where if you're not planning for it, you're not prepared for it, or kind of with how it's going right now, you might not want to, right? So you might have to try to reroute or plan something different. Now, successful EV road trips, they come down to one thing above all else: planning. We're going to dive deep into some tools and strategies that will make your cross-country journeys not just possible, but enjoyable. So the foundation of every EV road trip is reliable mapping and charger information. So here's a few tools that will help you out as a Canadian driver. A better route planner. That's kind of our go-to source to tell people, go check out, go download that almost as your first app to get. That remains the gold standard for EV road trip planning. What makes it essential for drivers is the ability to account for elevation changes, temperature effects, and driving speed. So all crucial factors in our varied landscape. I recommend creating an account and entering your specific vehicle details, including consumption patterns. Now, you can actually connect the Better Route Planner, actually to your vehicle using an OBD2 plug and pairing that with your phone. And that's going to give you way better actual information. So let's just kind of do a hypothetical planning road trip from Edmonton to Vancouver. So first, I'd enter my vehicle model and starting parameters, so including starting charge, temperature, and payload. And a Better Route Planner then generates a route with suggested charging stops. For this journey, you'll likely see recommended stops in places like Hinton, Kamloops, and Hope. The app shows you exactly how long to charge at each location and what battery percentage you'll arrive with. And being plugged in with an OBD2, it might even change along the way. So another great app is going to be PlugShare. So PlugShare and a Better Route Planner are going to be our two that we mainly recommend. They complement each other perfectly by providing recent user check-ins and status reports. That's PlugShare. This is invaluable where weather and maintenance issues might affect the charger reliability. So I always cross-reference a Better Route Planner, where they want you to stop, with PlugShare to check recent reviews of each charging stop. It's also great, PlugShare, to check to see what the cost is of charging. So the Charge Hub app deserves special mention because of its excellent coverage of our networks and payment options. It's particularly useful for finding level 2 destination chargers at hotels and attractions, which is really great along the highway. You know, you might want to stop overnight or heck, even at a campground or whatnot. For Tesla drivers, the in-car navigation system remains excellent for trip planning within the supercharger network, but I still recommend having all these other apps as backups. There's always more manufacturers that are getting into that in-vehicle navigation, but I'd say still check with the other ones because you might find, especially if your vehicle is able to do both CCS and we'll call it NACS, so that's the Tesla superchargers. Tesla isn't going to show you where the non-Tesla chargers are, and the other manufacturers that have in-car navigation aren't going to tell you where the Tesla, or most of them aren't telling you where the Tesla superchargers are. Also, when there's new chargers that come online, you might be able to find them on PlugShare before they're actually put into your vehicle's navigation. So you also have strategic charging approaches. So there are several approaches that work well, but here's a few different ones. So you got the 2080 method. It's worth considering for maximum efficiency because fast chargers work most quickly between roughly 20 and 80% battery capacity, depending on your vehicle. There's a few odd ones out there that you can get those high speeds below and above that, but for the majority of them, it's 20 to 80. On a long journey with multiple charging stops, you often save time by doing more frequent, shorter charging sessions within this optimal range rather than full chargers. This is especially true along corridors like the Calgary-Vancouver route or the Quebec-Windsor corridor, where chargers are plentiful. You also got the charging buffer strategy. This is the one I use most, especially traveling through the prairies. It's essential in less developed regions. In areas like Northern Ontario, parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, I recommend always having enough range to reach the next charger plus one more. This accounts for potential outages or unexpected detours. Yes, it means longer charging sessions, but that safety margin is important for your travels. Now, you got overnight charging. If you're staying at a hotel, it's something great to build into your trip plan. Rather than exclusively using DC fast chargers, identify hotels with level 2 charging where you can fully replenish overnight. Apps like PlugShare and ChargeHub let you filter for accommodations with charging. Some hotel chains like Best Western and Marriott have been aggressively adding charging stations across Canada. They usually are on a first-come, first-served basis, so even if you call ahead to ask about it, you should call ahead to ask about it and make sure it's working and see if you can book it also. So beyond just charging, there are other route considerations for road trips. You got elevation planning, especially if you're going to go out to both the west coast and the east have mountains. So elevation matters significantly. Routes like the Coquihalla Highway in BC or sections of the Trans-Canada through the Rockies can dramatically affect range. Modern planning tools account for this, but it's worth paying attention to the elevation profile for your route. The good news is you'll gain much of that range back on descents through regen braking. I know we had a member of Manitoba Electric Vehicle Association picked up a vehicle in Vancouver a few years back, and they were a little concerned about that as they climbed the mountain. They use a lot of power, but as you come down, you gain majority of it back. Seasonal route selection might mean choosing different paths depending on the time of year. The Rogers Pass in winter might require more charging stops than in summer. Construction awareness. That's a big one here, especially. I'm not sure totally how it is in other sections, but in the Prairies Highway 1, it always seems to be a major chunk of that being worked on. So it's particularly important during our short construction season. Major projects create detours that affect range calculations. Always check provincial transportation websites for construction notices along your planned route. Speed management. It's a simple but effective strategy. Reducing highway speed from 120 to 100 kilometers an hour can extend range by 10 to 20% on many EV models. On longer stretches between chargers, especially in less developed regions like parts of Manitoba or New Brunswick, this can make the difference between a comfortable arrival and range anxiety situation. You can even drop your speed more to about 80 kilometers an hour. I would say that's probably the lowest you want to go, but it will then get you much further. And depending on the vehicle you have, like a Tesla, it's going to show you how much farther you can go. So Canada's charging landscape, it's evolved dramatically in the recent years. With multiple networks operating across the country, we're going to break down some major players and what you need to know about each one. So Petro-Canada Highway. Their stations, they were typically located at Petro-Canada gas stations. There was a few odd ones at like Kenora that was located at an A&W. They used to be spaced about 250 kilometers apart, and that stretched from Victoria to Halifax along the Trans-Canada Highway. Most locations, they offered both CCS and CHAdeMO connectors with power levels up to 350 kilowatts on the newer stations. Payment was straightforward, just credit card, tap options. Pretty sure you can actually even use debit on those. Through their app. Actually, I don't think the app's working anymore. It's been a long time since I used it. But unfortunately, Petro-Canada seems to be removing a lot of those chargers to make way for I don't know what else. They seem to be very quiet about what they're doing. Even the app, they said there was going to be combining it with their normal Petro-Canada app, but I haven't seen any difference in the apps. So Petro-Canada used to be a great one, and hopefully they can kind of get back there. Flow, Canada's largest charging network, with particularly strong coverage in Quebec and Eastern Canada through the Circuit Electric Partnership. Their distinctive white and green chargers are reliable workhorses, though they do typically offer only 50 to 100 kilowatt charging speeds rather than the ultra-fast charging. And payment requires their Flow card, their app, and apparently some of the newer units do have a credit card area that you can use. One thing to note, some older Flow charger stations in remote areas might not have 24/7 cellular connectivity for payment processing, so having the app or card is recommended. Flow seems to be the more reliable deal. You're not going to get massive speeds, but it seems that I have yet to have one not work. So they are a great one. Just hang out though. They also are made in Canada, so might also help in your selection. ChargePoint has a significant presence in the urban areas and along some major corridors. Their stations vary widely in charging speeds from level 2 AC charging all the way up to 250 kilowatt DC fast charging, depending on location and installation dates. The newer ones seem to be installing a lot of higher speed chargers. The ChargePoint app is essential for accessing these stations, though their network also has roaming and with other providers like Flow in many Canadian locations. So you can actually use the ChargePoint app or the Flow app to actually get to other providers. BC Hydro deserves special mention for their provincial network that provides essential connectivity through British Columbia, including some more remote communities along Highway 16 and that northern reaches for the province. Their stations are typically 50 kilowatt CCS and CHAdeMO units, but they're very reliable. And they're covering those areas that the normal business maybe wouldn't cover because there's maybe not a whole lot of people. But BC Hydro is putting in chargers so that everybody can get where they need to go, which is awesome. EV network in Ontario has been rapidly expanding with high-powered chargers at en route highway service centers and other strategic locations. I believe they're also owned by Hydro One, so they're another utility provider installed charger. These 150 kilowatt plus kilowatt chargers have significantly improved travel along the 401 corridor and into northern Ontario. Tesla superchargers remain the gold standard for reliable high-speed charging for Tesla and now many other vehicle owners. The supercharger network covers most major Canadian routes very well, with stations typically offering 150 to 250 kilowatt charging. So not as high as others, but very reliable. The recent opening of some supercharger locations to non-Tesla vehicles using the Magic Dock adapter has been a game changer. Though this rollout is still in progress across Canada, which I actually think it might have actually even stopped, because I believe they're now just counting on the manufacturers to give you the adapters. Or you can purchase them through multiple different connectors, but kind of you purchase it sort of at your own risk. There is a few fairly well-known, reputable adapter manufacturers. There's also the independent and municipal networks. They shouldn't be overlooked. Many municipalities, particularly in BC, Quebec, and Ontario, have installed their own public charging infrastructure, which can be lifesavers in certain regions and are usually found on PlugShare. So you do have some, based on my experience and others, here's my honest assessment of some of the network reliabilities across Canada. So Tesla superchargers, they continue to lead the in reliability, with uptime typically exceeding 99%. BC hydro stations have also demonstrated excellent reliability, which is crucial for their role in covering cross-country travel. Flow stations vary somewhat by region, with their Quebec installations typically having the best maintenance and uptime, which I have yet to hear of issues at Flow, but I could see those places, Quebec and Ontario, having way better maintenance. Charge points reliability depends heavily on the site host, with some locations receiving better maintenance than others. The most common issues reported across all networks are payment issues, payment system failures, rather than charging hardware problems. In the prairies, you probably have heard more about, well, it's payment issues, but it was payment issues due to parts freezing in our cold. The Canadian charging landscape has improved dramatically in terms of payment interoperability. Here's what you need to know. So credit card payment is becoming more common at newer stations, particularly Petro-Canada and newer Flow and IV installations. This is a welcome improvement for travelers who don't want to have multiple apps on their phone, or some that I'm talking to a lot more older people that just don't want a smartphone. They're happy with their dumb flip phone. And it's like, I totally get that, especially with how annoying some of these smartphones can be at times. So network roaming allows you to also use one account across multiple networks. For example, the Flow card works on charge point stations in many locations and vice versa. And when you're in the app, you can see what they all connect with. Pricing models, they vary significantly. Some networks charge by the minute with different rates depending on charging speed, while others charge by kilowatt hour of energy delivered, where provincial regulations allow this. Petro-Canada and many newer stations use time-based charging with different tiers depending on how long you stay connected, encouraging drivers to move on once charging slows down. I'd also say use PlugShare to check on this, because there is some, I'm noticing dealerships, for sure here in Manitoba, and I'm sure they're doing it in other places, that are putting prices on their charging at their province, or charging at their location, set to being really ridiculous prices. One place is, I believe it's $150 an hour, and it's a slow 50 kilowatt charger. Another place, I believe, is up to $250 an hour, and it's also another 50 kilowatt charger. Talking to them, they basically said they didn't really want to install the chargers to begin with. So, yeah, this is their way of, I guess, dealing with it, making sure people don't use it. But, yeah, so pay attention and take a look. Even some of these Tesla chargers, depending on where you go, the price is going to be different and the time. Now, going with more urban versus rural charging experience, the contrast between urban and rural charging in Canada remains significant. Especially in major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax, you'll find abundant charging options, often with multiple stalls and networks to choose from. Competition has driven improvements in reliability and customer experience, which I really hope Manitoba becomes more like. Rural charging is improving, but still presents challenges. The most common issues isn't a complete absence of chargers, but rather having single unit installations. So just one charger, and if that one's good, it's good. If not, sorry. So those are ones you need to definitely have a backup plan for. Some of the most scenic routes, like the Cabot Trail in Nova Scotia or parts of the Icefield Parkway in Alberta, still have limited fast charging infrastructure. Level 2 destination chargers at hotels and attractions help fill these gaps, but they require longer stops, which isn't always a bad thing, especially if there's something scenic, something cool to look at that maybe you're spending 6 hours in that area, right? Maybe you go for a nice long hike and gets you enough charge to head back or do what you want to do, right? The other deal is for season, right? If there's one thing that makes EV road tripping unique, it's going to be our dramatic seasonal variations. So let's talk about how we can possibly make it a lot easier. So winter presents the greatest challenge for EV road trippers, with range reductions of 20 to 40% common in sub-zero temperatures. Here's possibly how to handle it. Preconditioning. Absolutely essential, especially at a hotel or wherever you got your vehicle plugged into. Always use your vehicle's scheduled departure or preconditioning feature while still plugged in before starting your journey. This brings the battery to optimal temperature without using your stored energy and makes your vehicle nice and warm for this road trip. En route battery warming is supported by many EVs prior to DC fast charging stops. Using this feature when you're about 20 to 30 minutes from a planned charging stop can significantly improve charging speeds in cold weather. It's just warming up your battery, which a warm battery allows you to get a lot faster. Just remember that if you're getting low in percentage, your vehicle, I've heard anywhere from 20 to 40% that some vehicles won't allow it because it uses up power. Winter emergency gear takes on an added importance in an EV. Beyond the usual Canadian winter kit, shovels, blankets, food, etc., I recommend carrying a portable level 1 and level 2 charging cable that can plug into a standard outlet. So this can be a lifesaver if you need to gain range slowly at an unexpected overnight stop. I would also say include a bunch of different adapters. Adapters have become my friend. I can then stop at a campground, plug into one of their deals. I'm finding a lot more chargers like GM, Tesla have where just the plug end comes out and you can change the plug end. So you can then carry multiple different ends to fit in the different plugins like dryer, washer, your normal 1450, a welder plug, a campground plug, but it won't take up as much room. So you can easily find a little cubby hole in your vehicle to store it. Plan shorter legs between charging stops in winter. I typically reduce my expected range by 50% as a safety margin when temperatures drop below -10. That way I never have any surprises. With cabin heat management, makes a big difference. Vehicles with heat pumps suffer less range loss, but any EV will benefit from using seat and steering wheel heaters instead of cabin heat when possible. Remember, warm butt, warm hands equals warm you. So you can drop the temperature in your vehicle and still feel comfortable. I know, especially with my Nissan Leaf, I don't even turn the heat on unless it's to defrost the windows. In the summer, it brings on its own considerations. So heat, it affects charging speed. So during heat waves, many DC chargers will reduce power output to prevent overheating. Or your vehicle might not actually take the heat because it will reduce how much it wants to take in because the battery is too warm. Try to schedule charging stops between cooler mornings or evening hours on extremely hot days. The other thing I've found is if your air conditioning isn't working, your battery won't be as good because the air conditioning that's used for in-cabin also is the same air conditioning that's used to keep the battery cool. So if your air conditioning is not working, go get that fixed because your battery, it's not going to be as good for trips. Air conditioning impacts range much less than heating, but still matters on long highway journeys. So setting the temperature a degree or two higher can make a meaningful difference over hundreds of kilometers. So peak travel considerations apply during summer tourist season. Popular charging stops along vacation routes like the Trans-Canada and Banff National Park or the Cabot Trail can become congested. Having alternative charging locations mapped out is wise during peak season, and it might be more level 2 charging stops. You're going to have more longer stops there, checking out the scenery. So maybe trying to find those level 2 chargers, right? It might be best. Now, one of the great seasons to maybe travel in is going to be the shoulder season. So that's going to be where during the spring and the fall, you got moderate temperatures, which means optimal battery performance and charging speeds without the car having to do much. You got less competition for chargers because you don't have the summer rush. Everybody's on holidays during the summer. But the variable weather, that's going to be a little bit of a bigger challenge, especially in mountain passes where conditions can change rapidly. The shoulder season sometimes requires packing for both winter and summer conditions. Let's move from the technical to the experiential. What it's really like to drive an EV across the country. So I know it's been a couple of years since I've taken a long road trip. And actually, if you've been with me for a while, you've heard about some of the long road trips. I went from Winnipeg to Drumheller, Alberta in a day. So that was in a 2019 Hyundai Kona Electric. So that one, it's almost like a Chevy Bolt. It was very slow charging speeds. And so I think that one maxed out at about 60 kilowatts battery or charging speeds. So each stop was long. Each stop was about an hour probably. And some of these stops were located behind malls, kind of in obscure spots. So we had to do some investigating. We also, I believe it was Medicine Hat, that we even had a charger that we went hunting down. So we spent a bunch of time trying to find it because it was in a weird spot. And it wasn't even working. So we had to go to the next one. So it's these things. But when we got the vehicle in 2019, we were going up to northern Alberta to Cold Lake area and where our family lived. That, when we started, was extremely hard. There was a massive gap between, not Saskatoon, one stop outside of Saskatoon, North Battleford. So there was a massive gap between North Battleford and where we needed to be in Cold Lake. So that was spent drafting behind semi-trucks, keeping our speed down low. And now there's multiple stops in Lloydminster, and actually even Cold Lake has a couple of level 3 fast chargers even. So it's getting way nicer, and there's now the hotels that have the stops or the chargers. There's also been times where when I actually was picking my car back up from Lloyd after the battery got replaced from one of these trips, coming back, it was probably about midnight, going through Regina and meeting up with a guy from Vancouver who was struggling to find a charger and found some random local person that helped him find the charger. But I had a great conversation with him. But he actually made guitars, but out of like found items, like antlers and basically recycled items. And it was super cool. It's so these longer road trips, and they're sometimes more annoying, but they're way better. They're like, I can go from Winnipeg all the way up to Cold Lake and be willing to actually sit down and chat still. Yeah, it took maybe 3 hours longer, back then, but I still had the energy to chat. Where with a gas vehicle, I got there quicker, but I was done. And so I was just ready for bed. So, yeah. Based on my experience and stories from many other people, here are some of the most common challenges for those long distance trips and how to possibly overcome them. So, charger occupancy is becoming more common as EV adoption increases. The solution? Use PlugShare's check-in feature to see real-time status when possible, and always have a backup charger location identified within range. Also with that, please use the PlugShare app and actually check in. So it helps you and helps others. Network app issues can occur in areas with poor cellular service. So before heading into known dead zones, make sure your apps are updated and you're preloaded with your payment methods. And you could, in PlugShare, people might also put the notes about that, you know, they didn't have cellular service. So that's another good reason to check PlugShare. So unexpected detours due to accidents or construction can throw off carefully planned charging stops. My recommendation, never run your battery below 20 to 30% when traveling in unfamiliar areas, giving you buffer for surprises. That way you don't have to worry about anything. Charging speed disappointments happen when stations advertise certain power but deliver less due to shared power, grid limitations, or your vehicle's charging curve. Solution, use that time of lower speed or slower than expected charging stops for proper breaks, something that's actually improved my road trip experience. I've used those stops for meals, bathroom breaks, naps. I've had many naps in my vehicles during it. And a big one in long trips, especially with the family, letting your kids and animals run out energy. If you've just had 2-3 hours in the vehicle, let them run. It's a much better road trip after. Hotel charging etiquette confusion is common. If you're relying on destination charging at your accommodation, call ahead to confirm availability. Some do book slots and any time limits or fees, and be prepared with a backup plan if charging isn't available as expected. So some of the hidden benefits of road tripping in Canada. It's not all challenges. There's unique joys to EV road tripping. So you get to discover small towns. It happens naturally as you stop to charge in places you'd normally drive straight through. You can find maybe even some free level 2 chargers inside these small towns that's close to a museum or a park or attraction. So you're not even paying for charging. You know, you go to a museum, go out to eat. Yeah, it's maybe been 4 hours, but you've then charged up, you're ready to go, and you've learned a little bit. The EV community, it's particularly strong in Canada, with fellow drivers often sharing trips, tips, and stories at charging stations. I've made some great connections during some longer charging stops. You got superior comfort of electric driving. It reduces the fatigue on long journeys. The smooth, quiet EV experiences makes the long Trans-Canada stretches much more pleasant, as most EVs, I guess gas vehicles come with it too, but they also have the lane keep, the autopilot, the smart cruise control. It's all these things that I never really thought of before, but was so nice afterwards. You can just focus on driving, focus on any dangers around you, and not have to worry constantly about other people, or as much about other people, slowing down just, a few kilometers here and there. And you get the environmental satisfaction of crossing our beautiful country while minimizing your environmental footprint, which adds a meaningful dimension to travel. So Canada's provinces and territories, they each offer unique EV road experiences. We're going to highlight some of these interesting routes and regional considerations. So you got British Columbia, which has the Pacific Marine Circle route. It's on Vancouver Island. It's become an EV showcase with charging available at key points around this stunning coastal and rainforest journey. So you can go check out the awesomeness of Vancouver Island, drive through a rainforest. It's just gorgeous. And you can do it in the silence of an electric vehicle. You got the sea to sky highway from Vancouver to Whistler, and it's even expanding more. It's now has redundant charging options, making this spectacular drive a pleasure in any EV. Then you got the BC's Kootenay region. It's seen major improvements in charging infrastructure, with the Kootenay Lake ferry crossings now well served by chargers on both sides. Alberta, you got the Icefields Parkway between Jasper and Banff. Remains challenging, but doable with careful planning, and definitely something cool to go check out. The installation of chargers at Saskatchewan River Crossing was a game changer for this route. In Saskatchewan, you got the Yellowhead Highway across the prairie that has some strategic charging placements that make the northern route viable for EV travel. And it's a gorgeous place. Everybody talks about the prairie super flat, but especially up the Yellowhead, there's some awesome valleys, some spectacular views. Ontario, you got the Lake Superior Circle Tour, has transformed from an EV impossibility to a showcase journey with the completion of charging infrastructure along the North Shore. Definitely much easier now to travel the major route there. The Niagara wine region, which I know a lot of people really love, has embraced EV tourism, with many wineries now offering destination charging, making for perfect day trips from Toronto. Just remember, don't drink too much or have a designated driver. Quebec, with all their massive amounts of chargers, but some of the main ones, you got the Gas Peninsula Circuit, offers one of Canada's most spectacular coastal drives, now fully accessible to EVs with regular charging options. The Route des Vins in the eastern townships combines Quebec's wine country with excellent charging infrastructure. Atlantic Canada, you got the Cabot Trail in Cape Breton. It has strategic charging locations that make this bucket list drive accessible to EV drivers with proper planning. You still got a little bit of gaps, but definitely worth it. Newfoundland's Irish Loop, south of St. John's, now has sufficient charging for this scenic coastal route. And going up north, you got the Alaska Highway route from northern BC and into Yukon has been seen remarkable progress, with charging now available at key points, making this epic journey possible for adventurous EV drivers. I've heard about some of the people that have done this trip, actually with a Rivian R1T. Definitely beautiful country, definitely worth it. And if you're into adventure and have different kinds of adapters, definitely go check out that amazing place. And Yukon area, the northern areas, Whitehorse and all that, they're doing amazing things up there. Now, let's address some of the most common questions that we've received about long distance travel. How accurate are the range estimates on highways? Most modern EVs do provide fairly accurate range estimates that adjust for conditions, but they can be optimistic at highway speeds. My rule of thumb is to apply a 10 to 15% buffer on the displayed range estimate for highway driving and more in extreme weather conditions. So in the winter, you might need more. What's the best EV for Canadian road trips? While vehicles with longer range obviously provide more flexibility, charging networks compatibility is equally important. Currently, vehicles with about 350 plus kilometer of range and access to both the CCS network and NACS, otherwise either natively or with an adapter, and vice versa. With Tesla, if you have a Tesla and you could do CCS, that's going to offer you the best Canadian road trip experience. How do you handle range anxiety on remote stretches? Beyond proper planning, I found that using energy consumption tracking while driving helps tremendously. With our Model X, I always have the little graph up showing how I'm doing. Most EVs show real-time efficiency, allowing you to adjust your driving style to improve range if needed. It's always easier to just slow down or kind of, especially with range anxiety, what I like to also tell people is you can basically plug in anywhere. It goes back to us saying with the level 1 charger, kind of wherever you have power, there's usually at least a plug-in, right? Are there still charging deserts in Canada? Yes, but they're shrinking rapidly. The North Shore of Lake Superior was once the most notorious gap, but now has workable charging options. Parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, away from the Trans-Canada, especially the north, still present challenges, as do some sections of Newfoundland outside the main highway corridor. So we've collected some of these practical tips to help from EV owners on trips. Again, always have a backup charging option identified within range. Call ahead to confirm charging availability at smaller or more remote locations if it's possible. Some of these more northern remote communities, especially that BC Hydro has set up, there's nobody around. Join multiple charging networks rather than relying on one. And consider having a multitude of different adapters. Again, especially with more like GM and Tesla that you can just plug in, plug out type deal. You don't need a multiple chargers. I've spent way too much time and money collecting chargers that are great for road trips or whatever that are small. I got a bunch of different adapters so that I can charge on a welding plug, a heater plug, at a campground, and more. So download offline maps for areas with poor cellular coverage, especially if you're going up to that more remote northern areas of BC or Quebec. In very cold conditions, you'll get better range by keeping your vehicle in a consistent drive cycle rather than stopping and restarting multiple times. So this kind of wraps up. It's a little different than I normally do, so hopefully it works out. But this kind of wraps up what we've been talking about all these times, and hopefully it makes this summer, when you're probably going to do your road trip, and hopefully it makes it a lot easier to do and a lot more enjoyable. It's when we get these enjoyable road trips, like even my first road trips with an electric vehicle, honestly weren't super enjoyable because it was stressful. Figuring out where a charger was, how I was going to do it, especially being so long ago, right? It was because I knew there wasn't a charger where it would be the easiest, like in Lloydminster, right? It was planning for that. But it's now become a lot better. So yes, it might be a little work right now, but it's going to get better. Every year is getting better. I even see here in Manitoba, at the southern part of the province, all these cool little towns are adding chargers. Dealerships are adding chargers, right? So yeah, feel free to reach out to me with any of your EV road trip advice, your trip that you've taken, maybe your struggles, your challenges, Or what was super awesome about it? Maybe some place that you've never heard of before, but you stopped and charged there and you found this cool little attraction, maybe a new favorite restaurant. So yeah, let me know about these. Who knows? Maybe I'll go check out some of these. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me by email at truenorthevpodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach me on Facebook, which I've been kind of stepping back from any of the social media, right? At True North EV. Also, if you're within Manitoba, definitely come check out Manitoba Electric Vehicle Association. We got a bunch of different things planned for the summer, and hopefully we got some big things coming up, hopefully, if it all works out. And so, yeah, come check us out. You can check it out on manitobaev.ca. Also, if you want way smarter people than me to hear from, you go listen to Kilowatt Podcast. He's way more knowledgeable, way smarter. He'll get you up with the latest news and all that going on in all the electric vehicles. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully we can keep this track. I kind of only messed up once so far this year, and hopefully we can keep it going with being every 2 weeks having an episode up. So thank you. Thanks for listening to me on this longer episode, and have yourselves a great week.